Metacognition is cognition about cognition, thinking about thinking, or knowing about knowing, and higher-order thinking skills. It comes from the root word meta, meaning beyond. It can take many forms. It includes knowledge about when and how to use particular strategies for learning or for problem solving. There are generally two components of metacognition: knowledge about cognition and regulation of cognition. Metamemory, defined as knowing about memory and mnemonic strategies, is an especially important form of metacognition. Differences in metacognitive processing across cultures have not been widely studied, but could provide better outcomes in cross-cultural learning between teachers and students. Some evolutionary psychologists hypothesize that metacognition is used as a survival tool, which would make metacognition the same across cultures. Writings on metacognition can be traced back at least as far as On the Soul and the Parva Naturalia of the Greek philosopher Aristotle. Definitions. This higher-level cognition was given the label metacognition by American developmental psychologist John H. Flavel. The term metacognition literally means cognition about cognition, or more informally, thinking about thinking. Flavel defined metacognition as knowledge about cognition and control of cognition. For example, a person is engaging in metacognition if he notices that he is having more trouble learning A than B, if it strikes him that he should double-check C before accepting it as fact. J. H. Flavel. Andreas Demetriou's theory used the term hypercognition to refer to self-monitoring, self-representation, and self-regulation processes, which are regarded as integral components of the human mind. Moreover, with his colleagues, he showed that these processes participate in general intelligence, together with processing efficiency and reasoning, which have traditionally been considered to compose fluid intelligence. Metacognition also involves thinking about one's own thinking process, such as study skills, memory capabilities, and the ability to monitor learning. This concept needs to be explicitly taught along with content instruction. Metacognitive knowledge is about our own cognitive processes and our understanding of how to regulate those processes to maximize learning. Some types of metacognitive knowledge would include content knowledge, which is understanding one's own capabilities, such as a student evaluating his/her own knowledge of a subject in a class. It is also notable that not all metacognition is accurate. Studies have shown that students often mistake lack of effort with understanding in evaluating themselves and their overall knowledge of a concept. Task knowledge, which is how one perceives the difficulty of a task, which is the content, length, and the type of assignment. The study mentioned in content knowledge also deals with the ability of one to evaluate the difficulty of the task related to their overall performance on the task. Again, the accuracy of this knowledge was skewed, as students who thought the way was better, easier, also seemed to perform worse on evaluations, while students who were rigorously and continually evaluated reported to not be as confident but still did better on initial evaluations. Strategic knowledge, which is one's own capability for using strategies to learn information. Young children are not particularly good at this. It is not until upper elementary where students start to develop the understanding of strategies that will be effective. Metacognition is a general term encompassing the study of memory monitoring and self-regulation, meta-reasoning, consciousness, awareness, and auto-consciousness, self-awareness. In practice, these capacities are used to regulate one's own cognition, to maximize one's potential to think, learn, and to the evaluation of proper ethical, moral rules. In the domain of experimental psychology, an influential distinction in metacognition is between monitoring, making judgments about the strength of one's memories, and control, using those judgments to guide behavior. Dunlosky, Sarah, and Baker covered this distinction in a review of meta-memory research that focused on how findings from this domain can be applied to other areas of applied research. In the domain of cognitive neuroscience, metacognitive monitoring and control has been viewed as a function of the prefrontal cortex, which receives sensory signals from other cortical regions and through feedback loops implements control. Metacognition is studied in the domain of artificial intelligence and modeling. Therefore, it is the domain of interest of emergent systemics. It has been used, albeit off the original definition, to describe one's own knowledge that we will die. Writers in the 1990s involved with the grunge music scene often used the term to describe self-awareness of mortality. Components. Metacognition is classified into three components. Metacognitive knowledge is what individuals know about themselves and others as cognitive processes. Metacognitive regulation is the regulation of cognition and learning experiences through a set of activities that help people control their learning. Metacognitive experiences are those experiences that have something to do with the current, ongoing cognitive endeavor. Metacognition refers to a level of thinking that involves active control over the process of thinking that is used in learning situations, planning the way to approach a learning task, monitoring comprehension, and evaluating the progress towards the completion of a task. These are skills that are metacognitive in their nature. Metacognition includes at least three different types of metacognitive awareness when considering metacognitive knowledge. Declarative knowledge refers to knowledge about oneself as a learner and about what factors can influence one's performance. Declarative knowledge can also be referred to as world knowledge. Procedural knowledge refers to knowledge about doing things. This type of knowledge is displayed as heuristics and strategies. A high degree of procedural knowledge can allow individuals to perform tasks more automatically. This is achieved through a large variety of strategies that can be accessed more efficiently. Conditional knowledge refers to knowing when and why to use declarative and procedural knowledge. It allows students to allocate the resources when using strategies. This in turn allows the strategies to become more effective. Similar to metacognitive knowledge, metacognitive regulation or regulation of cognition contains three skills that are essential. Planning refers to the appropriate selection of strategies and the correct allocation of resources that affect task performance. Monitoring refers to one's awareness of comprehension and task performance. Evaluating refers to appraising the final product of a task and the efficiency at which the task was performed. This can include re-evaluating strategies that were used. Similarly, maintaining motivation to see a task to completion is also a metacognitive skill. The ability to become aware of distracting stimuli, both internal and external, and sustain effort over time also involves metacognitive or executive functions. The theory that metacognition has a critical role to play in successful learning means it is important that it be demonstrated by both students and teachers. Students who demonstrate a wide range of metacognitive skills perform better on exams and complete work more efficiently. They are self-regulated learners who utilize the right tool for the job and modify learning strategies and skills based on their awareness of effectiveness. Individuals with a high level of metacognitive knowledge and skill identify blocks to learning as early as possible and change tools or strategies to ensure goal attainment. Swanson found that metacognitive knowledge can compensate for IQ and lack of prior knowledge when comparing 5th and 6th grade students' problem solving. Students with a high metacognition were reported to have used fewer strategies but solved problems more effectively than low metacognition students, regardless of IQ or prior knowledge. In one study examining among students who did text messaging during college lectures. It was suggested that students with higher metacognitive abilities were less likely than other students to have the learning impacted by using a mobile phone in class. Metacognologists are aware of their own strengths and weaknesses, the nature of the task at hand, and available tools or skills. A broader repertoire of tools also assists in goal attainment. When tools are general, generic, and context-independent, they are more likely to be useful in different types of learning situations. Another distinction in metacognition is executive management and strategic knowledge. Executive management processes involve planning, monitoring, evaluating, and revising one's own thinking processes and products. Strategic knowledge involves knowing what, knowing when and why, and knowing how. Both executive management and strategic knowledge metacognition are needed to self-regulate one's own thinking and learning. Finally, there is no distinction between domain-general and domain-specific metacognitive skills. This means that metacognitive skills are domain-general in nature and there are no specific skills for certain subject areas. The metacognitive skills that are used to review an essay are the same as those that are used to verify an answer to a math question. Metacognitive experience is responsible for creating an identity that matters to an individual. The creation of the identity with metacognitive experience is linked to the identity-based motivation model. The identity-based motivation model implies that identities matter because they provide a basis for meaning-making and for action. A person decides also if the identity matters in two ways with metacognitive experience. First, a current possible identity is either part of the self and so worth pursuing, or the individual thinks that the identity is part of the self, yet it is conflicting with more important identities and the individual will decide if the identity is or is not worth pursuing. Second, it also helps an individual decide if an identity should be pursued or abandoned. Usually, abandoning identity has been linked to metacognitive difficulty. Based on the identity-based motivation model, there are naive theories describing difficulty as a way to continue to pursue an identity. The incremental theory of ability states that if effort matters, then difficulty is likely to be interpreted as meaning that more effort is needed. Quote, "Here is an example. A woman who loves to play clarinet has come upon a hard piece of music. She knows that how much effort she puts into learning this piece is beneficial. The piece had difficulties, so she knew the effort was needed. The identity the woman wants to pursue is to be a good clarinet player. Having a metacognitive experience, difficulty pushed her to learn the difficult piece to continue to identify with her identity." The entity theory of ability represents the opposite. This theory states that if effort does not matter, then difficulty is likely to be interpreted as meaning that ability is lacking, so effort should be suspended. Based on the example of the woman playing the clarinet, if she did not want to identify herself as a good clarinet player, she would not have put in any effort to learn the difficult piece, which is an example of using metacognitive experience difficulty to abandon an identity. Relation to sapience. Metacognologists believe that the ability to consciously think about thinking is unique to sapient species and indeed is one of the definitions of sapience. There is evidence that rhesus monkeys, apes, and dolphins can make accurate judgments about the strengths of the memories of fact and monitor their own uncertainty, while attempts to demonstrate metacognition in birds have been inconclusive. A 2007 study has provided some evidence for metacognition in rats, but further analysis suggested that they may have been following simple operant conditioning principles, or a behavioral economic model. Strategies. Metacognitive-like processes are especially ubiquitous when it comes to the discussion of self-regulated learning. Being engaged in metacognition is a salient feature of good self-regulated learners. Reinforcing collective discussion of metacognition is a salient feature of self-critical and self-regulating social groups. The activities of strategy selection and application include those concerned with an ongoing attempt to plan, check, monitor, select, revise, evaluate, etc. Metacognition is stable in that learners' initial decisions derive from the pertinent facts about their cognition through years of learning experience. Simultaneously, it is also situated in the sense that it depends on learners' familiarity with the task, motivation, emotion, and so forth. Individuals need to regulate the thoughts about the strategy they are using and adjust it based on the situation to which the strategy is being applied. At a professional level, this has led to emphasis on the development of reflective practice, particularly in the education and healthcare professions. Recently, the notion has been applied to the study of second language learners in the field of TESOL and applied linguistics in general. This new development has been much related to Flavel, where the notion of metacognition is elaborated within a tripartite theoretical framework. Learner metacognition is defined and investigated by examining the person knowledge, task knowledge, and strategy knowledge. Wendon has proposed and used this framework, and Zhang has adopted this approach and investigated second language learners' metacognition or metacognitive knowledge. In addition to exploring the relationships between learner metacognition and performance, researchers are also interested in the effects of metacognitively oriented strategic instruction on reading comprehension. The efforts are aimed at developing learner autonomy, interdependence, and self-regulation. Metacognition helps people to perform many cognitive tasks more effectively. Strategies for promoting metacognition include self-questioning, thinking aloud while performing a task, and making graphic representations of one's thoughts and knowledge. Carr, 2002, argues that the physical act of writing plays a large part in the development of metacognitive skills. Strategy evaluation matrices can help to improve the knowledge of cognition component of metacognition. The SEM works by identifying the declarative, procedural, and conditional knowledge about specific strategies. The SEM can help individuals identify the strengths and weaknesses about certain strategies as well as introduce them to new strategies that they can add to the repertoire. A regulation checklist is a useful strategy for improving the regulation of cognition aspect of one's metacognition. ORCs help individuals to implement a sequence of thoughts that allow them to go over their own metacognition. King found that 5th grade students who used a regulation checklist outperformed control students when looking at a variety of questions including written problem solving, asking strategic questions, and elaborating information. Metacognitive strategies training can consist of coaching the students in thinking skills that will allow them to monitor their own learning. Examples of strategies that can be taught to students are word analysis skills, active reading strategies, listening skills, organizational skills, and creating mnemonic devices. Walker and Walker have developed a model of metacognition in school learning termed steering cognition. Steering cognition describes the capacity of the mind to exert conscious control over its reasoning and processing strategies in relation to the external learning task. Studies have shown that pupils with an ability to exert metacognitive regulation over their attentional and reasoning strategies used when engaged in maths, and then shift those strategies when engaged in science or then English literature learning, associate with higher academic outcomes at secondary school. Metastrategic knowledge. Metastrategic knowledge is a subcomponent of metacognition that is defined as general knowledge about higher-order thinking strategies. MSK had been defined as general knowledge about the cognitive procedures that are being manipulated. The knowledge involved in MSK consists of making generalizations and drawing rules regarding a thinking strategy, and of naming the thinking strategy. The important conscious act of a metastrategic strategy is the conscious awareness that one is performing a form of higher-order thinking. MSK is an awareness of the type of thinking strategies being used in specific instances, and it consists of the following abilities: making generalizations and drawing rules regarding a thinking strategy, naming the thinking strategy, explaining when, why and how such a thinking strategy should be used, when it should not be used, what are the disadvantages of not using appropriate strategies, and what task characteristics call for the use of the strategy. MSK deals with the broader picture of the conceptual problem. It creates rules to describe and understand the physical world around the people who utilize these processes, called higher-order thinking. This is the capability of the individual to take apart complex problems in order to understand the components in problem. These are the building blocks to understanding the big picture through reflection and problem solving. Characteristics of theory of mind: understanding the mind and the mental world. False beliefs: understanding that a belief is only one of many and can be false. Appearance-reality distinctions: something may look one way but may be something else. Visual perspective taking: the views of physical objects differ based on perspective. Introspection: children's awareness and understanding of their own thoughts. Action: both social and cognitive dimensions of sporting expertise can be adequately explained from a metacognitive perspective according to recent research. The potential of metacognitive inferences and domain general skills, including psychological skills training, are integral to the genesis of expert performance. Moreover, the contribution of both mental imagery and attentional strategies to our understanding of expertise and metacognition is noteworthy. The potential of metacognition to illuminate our understanding of action was first highlighted by Aidan Moran, who discussed the role of meta-attention in 1996. A recent research initiative, a research seminar series called Meta, funded by the BPS, is exploring the role of the related constructs of meta-motivation, meta-emotion, and thinking and action. Mental illness. Sparks of interest. In the context of mental health, metacognition can be loosely defined as the process that reinforces one's subjective sense of being a self and allows for becoming aware that some of one's thoughts and feelings are symptoms of an illness. The interest in metacognition emerged from a concern for an individual's ability to understand their own mental state as compared to others, as well as the ability to cope with the source of the distress. These insights into an individual's mental health status can have a profound effect on the overall prognosis and recovery. Metacognition brings many unique insights into the normal daily functioning of a human being. It also demonstrates that a lack of these insights compromises normal functioning. This leads to less healthy functioning. In the autism spectrum, there is a profound inability to feel empathy towards the minds of other human beings. In people who identify as alcoholics, there is a belief that the need to control cognitions is an independent predictor of alcohol use over anxiety. Alcohol may be used as a coping strategy for controlling unwanted thoughts and emotions formed by negative perceptions. This is sometimes referred to as self-medication. Implications. Wells and Matthews' theory proposes that when faced with an undecided choice, an individual can operate in two distinct modes: object and metacognitive. Object mode interprets perceived stimuli as truth, where metacognitive mode understands thoughts as cues that have to be weighted and evaluated. They are not as easily trusted. There are targeted interventions unique of each patient. That gives rise to the belief that assistance in increasing metacognition in people diagnosed with schizophrenia is possible through tailored psychotherapy. With a customized therapy in place, clients then have the potential to develop greater ability to engage in complex self-reflection. This can ultimately be pivotal in the patient's recovery process. In the obsessive-compulsive disorder spectrum, cognitive formulations have greater attention to intrusive thoughts related to the disorder. Cognitive self-consciousness are the tendencies to focus attention on thought. Patients with OCD exemplify varying degrees of these intrusive thoughts. Patients also suffering from generalized anxiety disorder also show negative thought process in their cognition. With any metacognition strategy, the main consensus is to believe that they are good. But in all actuality some may be very harmful. Cognitive attentional syndrome characterizes a metacognitive model of emotion disorder. Closing parenthesis. This ultimately develops through the client's own beliefs. Metacognitive therapy attempts to correct this change in the CAS. One of the techniques in this model is called attention training. It was designed to diminish the worry and anxiety by a sense of control and cognitive awareness. Also, it trains clients to detect threats, test how controllable reality appears to be. Works of art as metacognitive artifacts. The concept of metacognition has also been applied to reader response criticism. Narrative works of art, including novels, movies and musical compositions, can be characterized as metacognitive artifacts which are designed by the artist to anticipate and regulate the beliefs and cognitive processes of the recipient. For instance, how and in which order events and the causes and identities are revealed to the reader of a detective story. As Menacognition has pointed out, mere order has profound effects on the aesthetical meaning of a text. Narrative works of art contain a representation of their own ideal reception process. They are something of a tool with which the creators of the work wish to attain certain aesthetical and even moral effects. Mind-wandering. There is an intimate, dynamic interplay between mind-wandering and metacognition. Metacognition serves to correct the wandering mind, suppressing spontaneous thoughts and bringing attention back to more worthwhile tasks. Organizational metacognition. The concept of metacognition has also been applied to collective teams and organizations in general, termed organizational metacognition.